Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I'm here today with Nick Meredith. Nick, thank you very much for being here. And how are you today?
I'm really good, thank you. Yeah, all good.
You have an academic background in, amongst other things, in computer sciences. You've got a double master's. You've got some training in NLP, the Neuro Linguistic Programming NLP, not natural language processing. You started yours South African originally. You started your career over there as a web developer for Apple, believe it or not,
Well, I don't even
back
think
in the 90s.
the web didn't exist at that point, but I was a developer, yeah, definitely. But
Yeah.
yeah, just writing
They
applications.
weren't they
I guess.
weren't even Apple.
Yeah, there wasn't even.
Yeah.
I don't think the internet was even known at that point. It might have been sort of in the dark
No.
recesses of universities, but that was it.
Yeah, exactly. And then you moved to the UK, and you had your roles have primarily been as a manager and director level in insurance and sort of the fintech space. And you're now CTO for a really awesome, exciting new company called DeadHappy.
Yeah, sure. So DeadHappy was founded by two guys a few years back. And both of those people had sort of frustrations with kind of how people can go get themselves protected, specifically in the space of kind of life insurance. They both came from very different angles. One guy has worked in financial service for a long time, and the other guy had not worked in financial services at all, but was just trying to either get life insurance or a will, and got really frustrated. So yeah, they came up with this idea about how can we come up with a life insurance that thinks about the customer and kind of not and doesn't think about it from kind of a pure actuarial point of view. And that's kind of where DeadHappy came from, and it's very much. Yes, it's about a life insurance product, which, if you look at the product, it's quite different to the normal life insurance products out there now. It's a lot simpler. You can kind of the questions are not in sort of medical speak, because you get a lot of, I don't know whether you've ever done a life insurance product, but the questions can become quite complicated quite quickly. So they aim on to be very simple and engaging. And actually, if you look at the brand as well, the brand is very engaging, and it kind of it can actually be regarded as making light of some quite serious subjects. But there's definitely, the whole thing is serious about what the guys were trying to do. So yes, it's a life insurance product, but DeadHappy has bigger ambitions. We see ourselves as a death tech kind of company. And, our aim in life is to help people change
Death tech.
Oh, that's a thing now. If you look out there, death tech is now definitely becoming a thing, and you're seeing a lot of companies emerging in this space. You've got lots of innovation in the area of wills, particularly. We've also just started to go into the area of wills. But really, we see our mission in life is to help change attitudes to death and help people plan for their death and kind of face into that fact, so that when the time comes, the people who are left behind are in a good place. And actually, it gives those people peace of mind before the time comes as well.
You touched on it there, but you're kind of going about it in a very lighthearted way. You're trying to, on one hand, you're making it very easy. You're giving the consumers very good UX, and you're making it very easy for them to get, these products. But you're also a little bit lighthearted about it.
Yeah, because it's not a great subject. Is it, when you're sort of going on a website, and you've got to be thinking about what happens when you die, and who you're going to leave your cat to, and what's going to happen to your kids, and how you're going to pay for that. So yeah, the whole idea of the brand is to kind of make light of it a little bit. And actually, if you read our feedback on Trustpilot in particular, we get ridiculously high scores on Trustpilot, and a lot of the people talk about the lighthearted nature of the interaction with us. So yeah, that it just really works for us. So yeah, obviously it's a bit of a Marmite thing. So there are some people who don't like it, but again, if you look on Facebook or wherever we interact with customers, there's a huge amount of people that like what we do, and actually a huge amount of people that defend us when somebody decides to, take exception with some of the things we do or say. So yeah, seems to be working.
Yeah, it seems to be. I mean, it's a bit of a scale up, right? It's not really a startup anymore. It's been going for a little while.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, we've been through Series A funding. I think I'm trying to remember when it was. It was 2019 actually. So yeah, we been through Series A funding and a crowdfunding round last year, and we've got just under 10,000 customers now, happy customers.
I really like your site. It's got a fantastic UX, and it looks very modern. And if I was in the industry, if I was in the market for life insurance, I'd definitely check you out.
Great.
I've never gotten life insurance, but I have begun the process. I haven't finished yet, but I've begun the process of writing a will, and it's such a ball ache.
Yeah, it is. And again, probably the first thing is because you don't often write a will. When you come to do it, it's not something that typical people have really had to do before. So the questions are quite strange, and you're getting asked all sorts of things that you probably haven't thought about. So yeah, it is a bit of a ball ache, as you say. There's lots of questions, and a lot of these questions are to satisfy some sort of legal stuff, really. Because at the end of the will, you've got to kind of get it checked to make sure it makes sense from a legal perspective, etc. So there's definitely quite, as I said, a lot of companies are really starting to innovate in that space. The first kind of innovation is more around just kind of making it an online experience, a digital experience. But actually, there's a lot more you can go at with that, and that's kind of where we definitely going to be focusing some of our attention. We're already people who are buying insurance from our website already are in the mindset of thinking about what happens after they die, because that's the first question we ask people is what do you want to happen when you die? And we have these structures in place called death wishes, which are little small things that you can kind of use to help you think about what you want to happen. So, for example, a death wish could just be as simple as I want to leave cash to somebody, or it could be I want to send my ashes into space. We've got a few dozen death wishes that you can just pick and choose from and put them together. So that in itself already feels a little bit like a will. And there's a natural extension to kind of turn that all into something that resembles more of a will from a legal perspective. And then there's lots of technical innovation out there that means that probably in the future people are just going to be able to kind of sign it online, not have to worry about a wet signature, as they call it, which is still a requirement. So yeah, it's quite exciting.
In the past, you've worked for very large companies. You've had like hundreds, maybe even thousands of people downstream from you, and you're now at a very small startup. How does your experience translate, and is it easier?
Big companies have their own kind of things that kind of create stress and whatever, and positives, and small companies have kind of their own unique generators of stress and positive experiences. It's interesting because I've probably worked for as many startups as I have biggish companies when I think about it, because the company that I worked for when I first came to the UK, which now is a big corporate that kind of, as you know, owns Compare the Market and set up Compare the Market. When I moved over to the UK, that company was 7 people. I was one of those people, again, just writing code. But I never realized until I started to reflect on this that actually I had already gained some experience, I guess, in a startup a long time ago. But I guess some of the differences I suppose I've observed, one of them is, in my case, the startups I've worked for inside a bigger group, when it comes to things like funding, there's definitely always there's a cushion or a net there. That means that typically when you need more funding, the company's kind of there to kind of help you out. So that kind of pressure is different from when you're in a sort of a startup, as we were talking about now, where you're always having to think ahead about, okay, how am I going to generate more funding? So yeah, that's one kind of difference I've experienced, probably being at the sort of the position I am in the organization. It's sort of something you're aware of a lot more than you would be in a bigger organization, I guess. I guess the two big things for me that I've definitely learned in a startup is the fact that we're small, so we don't have anywhere near the number of people that we would have in a bigger company. And what that means is we have to really be careful and ensure that we pick the right things to focus on, because the people working on that stuff are a precious resource, if you want to use that word. And, you have to really be brutal in what you prioritize to make sure you're focusing on the right things. So in a strange way, it creates some quite useful behaviors that you can hopefully take through when into the stage when you scale, because we've frequently had to stop what we're doing and just say, okay, do we really need to be doing this stuff? And, just regroup and say, let's just focus on these two things and do those properly. I think that's one thing. And then the other one is, the need to have stepped into the technical stuff quite a lot more than I have had to do for a long while, which I've really enjoyed. But it's also been quite scary again, because of that point where you don't have a lot of people, you've just all got to get involved in stuff. And as I say, it's fun, but it's also scary.
Things must be, I guess, a lot more agile.
Oh yeah, I mean, definitely. Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, we are, as an organization, we've tried to model ourselves on some of the other startups out there. So we have very little process. We only have process and kind of bureaucracy where it's absolutely necessary. And so in terms of the agile way of working, that is an interesting point. When we first set up, when I first joined and we needed to set up a tech team, we immediately said, okay, we need to use Scrum and we need to use these processes that we're used to using. But quite quickly we realized that even those processes are they're too much for a startup. They're kind of getting in the way. So, team themselves kind of over time have kind of scaled down that process to kind of make sure that they still do the right things, but they don't use the things that are not required at this point. And we have this philosophy that we'll adjust the process as we grow, bit by bit. So I mean, from an agile perspective, we are shifting code out very quickly. We release multiple times a day, and we've really invested in time in creating a real kind of DevOps type culture to kind of support that. Lots of automation because we don't have many people again, and just being able to kind of ship stuff very quickly at the press of a button, and removing the need for lots of manual stuff, I suppose.
So, I was looking back at your career history, and it looks from the outside like people bring you in to help them sort of scale and help them build their teams. Is that something you would agree with?
I don't know. I've not probably not thought about it that way. I'm one of these people who kind of thinks I've gone through my career and I've been quite lucky, sort of to kind of move through different roles. And there's been an element of being in the right place in the right time. And every role that I've done has taught me something that I've been able to then kind of use in the next set of roles or subsequent roles. And so some of those roles I've moved into have required kind of either coming into a team that has been through a bit of turmoil and helping that team to kind of get itself together again and become, and start to be able to perform in the way it wants to. But equally, sort of certainly in my last role, certainly myself and some of my other colleagues, we were involved in helping to grow that team from probably, I'm guessing when I joined it was sort of, I don't know, I'm thinking about 80 people, but by the time I left, we were talking about 300 people across 3 different sites. So there's definitely an element of scaling up in those. Whether I was kind of brought in to do that, that's probably a debate, but I definitely probably was helped with kind of making those things happen.
But the team building side, that's something that's really very important to you, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Because obviously, and everyone's going to say this kind of stuff, but the people are kind of the key ingredient that makes a lot of this work. Obviously in tech, the technology is important as well. And I've always kind of liked the intersection between the people side and the technology side. And when those two kind of things come together in the right way, you can make some really great things happen. So yeah, the team building is really key for me, around making sure that the people who are in the teams are kind of happy and they're the right people. And, if you kind of make sure that those things are true, then a lot of the rest of it sort of takes care of itself to a degree. If you kind of set up the team in the right way and you get the right people and then you get out of their way, then they tend to kind of know what they're doing and tend to know how to kind of set themselves up in the right way, if that makes sense, because they're the people who are working on the ground all the time, and they kind of have a better idea of what to do than I do. And I've very, very much focused in DeadHappy to make sure that is the case. I've got some good people in, and I've kind of made sure that they've got the context, the right level of context and whatever support they need from me. But then I get out of the way and I just let them get on with it. So actually, well, you'll probably know John, who's one of our ex-colleagues who, was kind of a peer for me. There was one thing I always remember him saying that's always stuck with me was, our role was to take away every excuse from the team to be able to kind of deliver what they need to deliver. And that's not a negative thing. It's about, if the team have not got enough people, then we help them to get more people. If the team have got a blocker that they, cannot deal with themselves, we need to kind of help them get rid of that blocker. Or if they need a decision, we help them to get that decision. But we take away every excuse, but then we leave them to it.
When we spoke about this, you actually mentioned this to me yourself, so I'm not now going to throw it back to you as a question. that when you joined DeadHappy, you had to sort of form a seed of very quickly of a bit of an engineering team, and you brought on a handful of people that you knew and you could trust, senior people, and they all happen to be white men.
Yes.
So
you not by design.
So
but that's how it happened to be. Yeah. Yeah.
No, exactly. I am not saying you hired them because they were white men, because you needed the right people quickly,
yes.
Right? But so how aware are you, and then how do you now deal with this going forward?
Very aware. So I think, as we said before, when you're joining a startup, and I've already sort of said earlier that time is of the essence. You have to make every moment count. If you're building a team from scratch, you tend to sort of start with, okay, who do I know out there that's going to actually help me to get this up and running as quickly as possible? And so you turn to people that you've worked with. So in my case, a few people had expressed an interest in joining me, and I kind of welcomed it with open arms, really. So quite quickly, we kind of formed this team that happened to be kind of white males. I guess what we had a little bit of help from an external company, where actually we did have quite a lot of more diversity, but that was really from I guess you call them a nearshorer, who we work really closely with, and these people are pretty much part of our team. But from a permanent perspective, what you say is actually true. I think the great thing with a startup is, we've only really been going in anger for a couple of years. And so what we have sat down and done in the last 3 months is actually sort of said, okay, we have the luxury now, and we can actually design the values of the culture to kind of make sure that this just doesn't become a thing for us in the future. We're all very self-aware of, certainly in tech, how we are kind of set up. I guess when you look at the rest of the business, it probably isn't as much the case. There's a lot more kind of a more of a balanced spread, I think. But so what we've done is, there's been a group of people in DeadHappy who sat down and kind of put down some principles, really. So we don't want to make diversity and inclusion a strategy and just sort of a policy or whatever. We want to kind of embed it into the company culture and values. So that this group of people have sat down and created a set of principles about what we believe in and what we expect of people, and that's kind of something that we've put together and shared with the business. And really, every area is committing to how they kind of make those principles true for them. So in my case, a couple of things I've committed to is that our next hires are not going to be number one from a particular company because that in itself has an implication on inclusion, I guess, because you're bringing in people who have worked in the same way and thought in the same way, I guess, just because they've had to. So we're really going to push ourselves to kind of hire from somewhere else, which in itself is going to bring in some new thinking, I guess. And then the other one is committing to some of the things that we did really well in our previous roles, which is kind of starting to grow the community from the ground up. Setting up things that we want to kind of set up a code bar in Leicester. That worked really well for us in London, I know. And before I left my last role, we had a code bar running in Peterborough. So just getting involved in some of those things, and it's kind of more of a medium to long term approach there. But we believe that that's going to really help as well, not just us, but the community. And I've spoken to some other companies in the area who are keen to get involved. But yeah, it's just about committing to some things and then being held accountable. And the person who is kind of overseeing our diversity, inclusivity and equity stuff is definitely going to kind of make sure that she holds us accountable to our commitments. And I think that's how we're going to go about it. As I said, I think we're quite fortunate because we're early in our journey and we're already quite self-aware of it. So we're not going to suddenly find ourselves in a position in 3 years' time where we don't want to be, because we're not going into it blindly right now.
I think that's a great strategy, and I think you're right. It's early days for you, and
I mean,
I know if anyone can do it, I know you.
Yeah, but it's also this whole point of inclusivity. It's not just the usual things that gender and ethnicity. It's so a good example of something that we have done, and I'm really, it's just great, is that we have obviously a lot of people who would regard themselves as introverts, using that word, and these guys like working in very quiet spaces. And we've also got some quite noisy people in DeadHappy. And when you're in the office, it can be quite difficult to sort of focus and concentrate. So we put a survey out about the office, because we've got a great office and we spent a lot of time just getting it set up. But some of the feedback is that people found it very difficult to concentrate and work. So we've taken that feedback, and we've actually, during the lockdown, modified the office so that there's quite a lot of space now, that if you just can't take the noise or the radio playing in the background, you can go to these spaces and either work in a group in a quiet space or on your own in a quiet space. So that's another example of inclusivity, to make sure that different people with different learning styles or working styles are kind of considered. And then we've also used a tool called Tetramap, which is sort of like you got a lot of these psychological testing tools like Myers-Briggs and stuff. It's kind of a more, I'd say it's actually a more holistic tool that definitely recommend having a look at it. But what we've used Tetramap for is to help people to understand their preferences, and also to help understand other people's preferences. And what that means is that you can kind of, if you know that somebody has a certain set of preferences, this Tetramap can actually give you some useful tools to help you to approach them, and how not to approach them. So, a silly example might be people with a preference, they call it air. So they use these elements: earth, air, water, and fire. People with an air preference find it quite tricky if somebody just comes over to them and asks them a question, because these kinds of people focus heavily and get quite deep in focusing on their work. And when you come over and ask them a question, you kind of jolt them and take them out of that. So you learn that actually these kind of people, it probably makes more sense, if you want to kind of get the best out of them, is to book some time with them and let them know that you come to see them, so they can think about it up front and you're going to get the best answer from them. And then on the other side of that, this also shows you, it gives you some useful tools to understand how people behave when they're stressed. And that's really useful as well, because you can either use it to understand if you're kind of stressed, and also if you're stressed, you're more likely to behave in a certain way, and the impact that could have on other people. But from the other side, if you're working with somebody and you know about this stuff, you can kind of possibly detect that maybe they're stressed and kind of, react to that in the appropriate way. So that tool, I think, will help a little bit with inclusivity as well, just understanding different people's styles and ways of working and approaches, etc.
So now moving on to NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, can you give me a really brief overview of what this is and how it's useful to you?
Yeah, okay. So NLP has been
is it hypnosis? It's linked to hypnosis.
Hypnosis forms an element of one of the things that you learn when you're using NLP or training in NLP. NLP, which, as you said at the beginning, is neuro-linguistic programming, and the way you can think about it is it's kind of using language to program the brain. Now, it's not as clear cut as that. It's basically using language to and it's more than language, but the name sort of suggests that. But you're using kind of language and language patterns to kind of create the right level of communication in somebody else, so that they either understand you or you can kind of leave them, feeling positive or negative. So being quite deliberate about how you choose your language, being quite deliberate about various other things as well, and in doing so, you're a more effective communicator. But neuro-linguistic programming is a lot more than that. There's a whole area around modeling. So some of the founders of NLP were able to kind of model people who were good at certain things, such as therapy, and then kind of they were able to distill that down into kind of some patterns that they could see in those people, and then they could kind of codify that pattern as something that could be taught to other people. That could then kind of be, you could then also become an expert in that thing, because you could kind of model other people's excellence. So yeah, it's kind of, I think it sort of started around the 80s maybe, and it grew quite quickly. My views of it today is that it's grown arms and legs, and it's kind of lost its way a bit. But actually, there's quite a lot of useful stuff in there if you look at it and to do some training, and it's quite useful as a self-help tool. I found it very useful. It's going to help me understand how I do things, not so much why I do things. NLP doesn't look at why you do things; it looks at how you do things, and then helps you to kind of change how you do things. So it's less worried about, if you think of therapy, some therapies kind of look at, why you did things in the past, whereas NLP is looking at how you're behaving now and how you can kind of change that. And so it comes with a lot of kind of tools and techniques that you can use to kind of tweak behaviors in yourself or in others. So hypnosis is one of those things. So the founders modeled a few people who were very good hypnotists, and then kind of turned that into something that could be taught to other people. So yeah, you can use hypnosis to help people get into a particular state of mind, and then in that state of mind to help them kind of make changes for the better.
Do you hypnotize people? Is that how you've been so successful?
Yeah, not without them. I'm a qualified hypnotherapist, actually. So one thing I would say about NLP is you have to be very careful. And that's what I mean by, I think it's lost its way a bit, that they have these training courses that are condensed into a very small amount of time. They've just made the course shorter and shorter, and then people have kind of finished the course and then gone on to think that they can kind of go off and sort of hypnotize people and help people or whatever. But actually, there's a lot more to it, and I found that out quite quickly. So after I did quite a lot of NLP training, I went on and actually qualified as a proper hypnotherapist. I did a sort of a diploma in a company that was based in Brighton University. And then I also went on to do a master's degree in psychotherapy, because I really felt when I finished the NLP stuff that it had kind of sparked my interest, but I felt I was going to be a bit of a dangerous tool to go and try and work with anybody and kind of help them deal with like issues. So I went on and did a lot more. And then I actually, for a while, quit my job in tech and actually did that for 2 or 3 years full time. So yeah, during that time, I did hypnotize people. I specialize in the areas of phobias and post-traumatic stress and those kinds of things. And those things lend themselves. There's some really useful hypnotic techniques that can help people to kind of overcome phobias and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I did. I definitely don't do it surreptitiously or whatever, but yeah.
I don't know. We'll have to see about that. I think we're going to have to speak to some of your former colleagues.
Well, yeah, they're going to give you a stock answer. I wonder why that is. No.
Cool. So something that really surprises me about you is the imposter syndrome that you have. I guess, I don't know. I've spoken to so many people now, and so many people, especially really senior people, are really, it really affects them.
Yeah, I mean, and that's true. I think these days, sort of imposter syndrome is just something that everybody, most people, have those feelings or thoughts or whatever from time to time. And I think, so if I go back to your first point about me and imposter syndrome, yeah. So it is definitely. I talked about it earlier. I said I already indicated that. I said. A lot of the things I've done in life, I feel like I've been in the right place at the right time, and it's just been pure luck, or not pure luck, but a large element of luck that, I've been the person that's been there at the time when they've needed somebody to do something, so they've picked me. So that's an example of imposter syndrome, where you do attribute a lot of your achievements to luck. So that's one thing, but a couple of other elements to it is that you have a constant feeling or perception that you're not good enough, and that actually other people aren't aware of that. So, people have a false perception of you or an elevated perception of you. And so what that leads to is people either overworking to kind of compensate for their lack of ability, so that they don't get found out. Or actually people kind of trying to stay out of the limelight so they don't get found out. So, people in extremes, I've heard of people kind of resigning from jobs because they've got to the point that they are so worried they're going to be found out. They would rather just resign and then kind of start somewhere else where they're not known. So, yeah, I've definitely experienced some or all of those feelings from time to time. And I came across imposter syndrome when I talked about doing that master's in psychotherapy. I actually had come across it when I had been working with some clients, and I sort of thought, actually, I recognize some of those things that those people are saying. And then I happened to hear a radio program where Stephen Fry was talking about this thing, and that's where I heard the label imposter syndrome, where Stephen Fry was talking about this fact that every time he goes on stage, he has this feeling that he's going to be found out for being a fraud. And similarly, whenever he releases a new book, he thinks this is going to be the book that basically finishes him off because he got away with all the other books, but this is going to be the one where he's found out. And so that's where it really sparked my interest, and I decided to do quite a lot of, as I said, I ended up doing my dissertation on it. And I've just found it really useful for me because what that taught me is that the research shows that kind of 8 out of 10 people have these feelings from time to time. And actually, as you said earlier, the more senior you are, the more likely it is that you're going to have these feelings. So just knowing those kinds of things already helps to disarm it a little bit, because you know that if you're sitting in a room with 10 people, probably 8 of you are thinking the same thoughts that you are. So that kind of helps. At DeadHappy, we've actually really tried to embrace this thing, and we've actually, one of our values is none of us know what we're doing. That's actually a value of the company. And what that value talks about a few things, but it definitely talks about imposter syndrome. And actually, when you read the blurb underneath the value, it does say something around it's okay to feel like an imposter sometimes, and it's okay to make mistakes. So learn from those mistakes and move on. So, we've really, again, tried to kind of make sure that we are open about it. We talk about it from the moment somebody starts to sort of say, look, you're probably going to feel some imposter feelings because it's only natural. You've joined a new company, a new culture. a new group of people with new ways of working, why wouldn't you feel an element of being an imposter because you're new to this thing, and over time that'll go away. But actually, from time to time, you're going to be in a meeting or something where you're going to have these feelings. Just embrace it and actually tell people that you're feeling it. And that's kind of how we've really tried to kind of reframe it in our companies to almost face it head on and talk openly about it. And I think it's definitely helped. And a lot of that is kind of stuff I've learned from previous roles. But yeah.
Thank you for being so open with me.
Yeah, it's fine. As I say, I know it's just one of those things I'm aware of. I'm aware when I have it now, but I'm also aware that I can kind of move on from it. And I've personally done a couple of talks on it. I've done one in previous company to a huge group of people, and I talk about myself, but I also sort of leave people with a number of techniques to help them. So it's things like, as I said, kind of recognizing that there's a few of you doing it, but also, just going back and looking at your LinkedIn profile and noticing, well, you can't be that much of a fraud if you've done all of these things. Just reminding yourself of the things you've done, reminding yourself that a company wouldn't hire you and waste all of that time and effort hiring you if you weren't at least reasonably okay at what you do. I actually, I'm on a CTO forum, and somebody actually put a question on the other day and sort of said, I'm feeling these feelings. Does anybody know of a way to help me? And a load of people kind of piled in with some really useful stuff. And one guy said something that I hadn't considered. He said, it would be quite strange if you didn't have imposter feelings from time to time, because it does show you are trying to kind of question yourself and understand how you can improve, because imposterism, a lot of it is also comparing yourself to others. So as long as it's done in a reasonable way, it can be a useful tool, I suppose. But it's just one of those things, if you let it run away with you, it can be quite damaging, I suppose.
Yeah, excellent point. I guess there's a balance there to be had, right? You can't be too overconfident all the time either, can you?
Yeah, exactly.
Before I let you go, I need the joke of the show from you.
It goes like this. It's so what did the Dalai Lama say to the hot dog vendor?
I don't know. What did he say?
He said, make me one with everything.
Hey, nice one. Thank you, Nick. And that's all, folks. Thanks a lot for tuning in. For more info, for questions, comments, or feedback, please head on over to aheadintech.com and don't forget to subscribe.